But Mark, let's move on into our last topic. And before we do, I will say it again, because I said at the beginning of the podcast, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. I didn't do what I usually do. I'm starting to do this, Mark, to try to get people involved in our Discord and kind of see what they were missing. One thing you're missing is I posted a screenshot of myself playing WoW with Dave the other night, and then Mark said I should be playing Persona 5 instead of World of Warcraft after Jake asked me what server, Horde or Alliance, am I going to be playing WoW Classic? So that's the kind of stuff that you're missing, because Mark, you said that I should be playing P5 instead of WoW right now.
Yep. And that's exactly what football players want. Football fans want to do.
That's exactly what
play
they want.
WoW.
We're also, there's NBA conversations in there, NFL. There was a Last of Us conversation. So really, at the bronze level tier, you can get in there, talk with our patrons like Retro, Jake, Pat, Soapy, John. You can talk to the MVP crew, or as we're called, Da Boys, in the Discord server. So go ahead, check that out down below in the description. But Mark, let's close out the podcast talking about the Dallas Cowboys. How about them Cowboys?
How about them?
What we are looking at today is an easy discussion of should the Cowboys be Super Bowl favorites this year. And kind of to set this one up a little bit, if you look at the Super Bowl odds for the 2020 Super Bowl, so this year's Super Bowl, the best odds, Chiefs and Patriots at 6-1. The second best odds at 8-1 are the Rams. Fourth best or third best are the Saints at 9-1. Colts at 10-1. And then fifth are the Bears, Eagles, and Packers at 14-1. The Cowboys, a little bit farther down, they are tied with the Niners, Seahawks, and Vikings at 25-1 odds to win the Super Bowl. So if my understanding of betting is correct, if the minimum bet you have to put down is $100 and you put $100 down on the Cowboys and they end up winning the Super Bowl, that $100 just turned into $2,500 for yourself.
You are now a millionaire.
You are now a millionaire. Hey, if you put $100 down on either the Cardinals or the Dolphins, put $100 down on those two teams, you want to know how much money you'll win?
Sure.
$20,000. 200-1 odds.
So you should do it, and you'll be rich.
Well,
that's our prediction.
If you have $100 to spare and you think it could happen, why not?
Don't need to pay rent this month.
You don't need to pay rent.
Bet on the Cardinals to win the Super Bowl instead.
The question is, should the Cowboys be favorites? Because if you look at the odds, they're obviously not. Correct. At 25-1. But this is a team that has Zeke, Dak Prescott, and now in the receiving core, Amari Cooper comes back. They've got Allen Hurns on this team. They now have Randall Cobb in the their top receivers are basically Randall Cobb, Allen Hurns, Amari Cooper, Tavon Austin, and Mike Gallup as well. In your mind, Mark,
can't forget about Jason Witten.
And Jason Witten coming back. Are the odds makers wrong? Should the Cowboys be favorites for this year's Super Bowl?
Well, here's the problem for the Cowboys is
their division.
Well, their division, kind of. But they also need to worry about just the curse that is their division. They won it last year, therefore they can't win it again. Also...
It's kind of like the NFC South, too.
Right? So they have to worry about that, of not being able to win back-to-back in this case. But you look at the rest of what they've got. I mean, I'm not super worried about the New York Football Giants. But the last time defending Super Bowl champion Eagles, they ran into some trouble with Carson Wentz getting injured. I almost said Carson Palmer, speaking of injuries. But, with Carson Wentz getting hurt, if he can stay healthy, that is such a good team that they should be able to compete again. Dwayne Haskins is there, and he looks like he's a pretty good quarterback. He can at least compete. Yeah. It's a tough division. It's not a sure thing. Do I think the Dallas Cowboys are the best looking team right now on paper in their division? I actually do. I think that Dak doesn't have to be amazing. People want to criticize him and say he's not an elite quarterback or whatever. Doesn't matter. He can do what he needs to do in this system. You've got Zeke, who, even though Zeke tends to do things off the field, when he's on the field, he plays really, really hard and he helps you win games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what was it last year that we were complaining that they don't have anybody to throw the ball to? Well, they went out and they got a bunch of people to throw the ball to.
Yeah.
So they still have a good offensive line. It's not as amazing as it kind of was before, but it's still really good. Got a lot of really talented players on defense as well, even though the defense is a little unproven compared to where you want it to be. The Dallas Cowboys are a real team. Are they necessarily a Super Bowl favorite? I don't know, because we got to look at the teams that they have to get past in the playoffs. And not all these teams will be in the playoffs, but they got to be able to beat the Vikings. They got to be able to beat the Bears. They got to be able to beat the Rams. They got to be able to beat the Saints and the Eagles. There's a lot of teams they got to get past
It's
first.
interesting you say that because every single team you just listed, they play the Eagles twice. They play the Saints once. They play the Vikings once. They play the Bears once. They play the Rams once. They play the Patriots once. That's 7 games against playoff teams.
Yeah.
And then you could potentially throw in...
You can throw the Packers in there potentially.
Could throw the Packers in there. So that's half of their schedule is against playoff-level opponents. And how I see this kind of year playing out for the Cowboys, because I'm looking at their schedule right now, the most important part of their year is the first 7 games. In my mind, they have to go 5-2, 6-1 in order to have a shot at making the playoffs. And the reason why I say that, I expect them last year, the only divisional game they lost was one game against the Redskins, and one of their wins against Philly was in overtime. I expect that to flip. I expect them to sweep the Giants again. I expect them to sweep the Redskins if Dwayne Haskins is starting. Yes, I like Dwayne Haskins, but rookie quarterback, if the Redskins win, they're going to have to steal it from the Cowboys.
And what do they got right now? Case Keenum, right?
Yes, they do. Case Keenum, which he wasn't bad in Minnesota, but
He's
we
all right.
saw in Denver he wasn't good away from Pat Shurmur. But I think that this Cowboy team could go, what would that be, 5-1 in the division? So that's 5 wins that they could get right there. But if I look at the first 7, I think they can beat the Giants. I think they can beat the Redskins. I think they can beat Miami because we don't know what Josh Rosen's going to be like for that team. I think they can also beat the New York Jets. The big question for me is what do they do against the Saints, the Packers, and the Eagles? Because if you look after their bye, their Week 8 bye, New England will be tough. Chicago's going to be tough. Los Angeles is going to be tough. And although I said they'll probably go 5-1 in the division, the Eagles on the road will be tough. And the Redskins could be a tough team because Dwayne Haskins, if he's playing Week 17, they could be playing for you know what, we're just going to spoil your season kind of a game. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Vikings, which, that's not a for sure loss, but that's still a tough game, and you got to show up and play your best game there to where I could potentially see, let's say they go 5-2 in their first 7. So they're 5-2. Then the Giants, the Lions, the Bills, they're at 8. Then that means you have to beat the Eagles and beat Washington to potentially even win the division or get into the playoffs. That's what I think. It's going to come down to, for them, those last 2 divisional games, for them to be either a wild card team in the playoffs or even winning the division.
And it's going to be tough because their division's not easy. Mm-hmm. I think you're discounting the Eagles a little too quickly, but that's all right.
I'm giving the split. I mean, I think the Eagles could beat them at home and the Cowboys will win at home, but that's usually how I give my splits.
You know, it's going to be tough in this case because, like you said, they've got some really, really good matchups in here. They're going to play pretty much any of the teams they could possibly play in the playoffs, they're going to run into them in the regular season. It's going to be hard. Like 9-7 would be an accomplishment this season. That's not saying they can't win more, 10 or 11, but 9-7 is going to be a real accomplishment here. And that's without assuming that the Redskins don't become really good. The Packers don't bounce back. The Dolphins don't suddenly figure it out because Josh Rosen was, hiding the fact that he's actually a really good quarterback. Or that the Bills suddenly turn it on this year. There's a lot of things that could happen because any given Sunday, it's going to be a little bit difficult, I think, for the Cowboys, but they've got weapons. They've got what they need.
I've got another interesting fact, and I know that this might stay the same, but it's interesting. Every single loss except for one last year. Basically, the only loss that they didn't have on the road was Tennessee Monday night. Every other game, at Carolina, at Seattle, at Houston, at Washington, at Indy, were all losses. And the thing I look at this year, and yet again, they could change this, but they need to change it because if I just look at their schedule, the Saints are on the road. New England's on the road. Chicago's on the road. You have Philly on the road. That's 4 games right there that are like, wow, those are tough games. And I know last year in Philly, they won in Philly, but I'm expecting a better Philly team this year, especially after them trading for Jordan Howard. They're going to have a more consistent running back back there for them. That's 4 games right there that could be losses for the Cowboys if we base it on how they played last year on the road.
Yeah. And if you're asking, the odds of the team getting in the playoffs, I'm going to pick them to get in the playoffs right now as it stands. The odds of them winning the division, I'm going to probably lean towards them winning the division, but I don't know. That's a toss-up between them and Philadelphia. How far they can get into the playoffs, like I said, it's tough. I think the Saints are still a really good team. Chicago Bears should become a better offense this year than they were last year, and that defense was the number 1 defense in the NFL. You're going to still have to play the Rams, who, unless that Super Bowl hangover really kind of gets them, which it very well might, they're going to be a good team. The Vikings, they're going to want to bounce back. Kirk Cousins hopefully getting used to this team.
One fucking game away, man. One game away.
The Packers were a surprisingly bad team last year, partially because Aaron Rodgers never got over that injury week 1.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with new coach Matt LaFleur because Mike McCarthy was kicked out of town.
Exactly.
He basically got, you know what, I'm not going to say it. That was a spoiler for Game of Thrones. People get mad when I spoil that on Rick and Johnny podcasts, so I won't say it.
The thing I'll say, what Aaron Rodgers is probably scared about, of course, is week 1 got injured by Khalil Mack. Week 2, he's going to see Khalil Mack again. He's coming right back for him.
Open up the NFL season, he gets to see Khalil Mack.
Right. That would be
Aaron, I missed you.
Right, Sunday Night Football, that was kind of luckily it worked out fine for the NFL rating-wise because Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers and made them come back. But that was like a worst nightmare of really? Sunday Night Football, and you injure the star of the entire league who's not Tom Brady. If now the very opening game, welcome to year 100, and Aaron Rodgers got hurt.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. That would really be a bad one for the NFL. And you don't want anybody to get injured. But
yeah,
that's a side note.
I'm gonna go ahead and say if the Cowboys win the division, expect them to, if they win the division, their odds of winning the Super Bowl increase. Because to me, the biggest thing with this team, and I know this is based off of last year, but they got to prove to me that they can change, is winning on the road. If this team's a wild card team, they're losing that first game. The big thing is, even that Seattle Dallas game last year, it was a close game for the most part. Cowboys edged out the Seahawks because they were at home. They could feed off of that home energy crowd. If that was in Seattle, would have been a completely different game in my mind, especially because it's how hard it is to play in Seattle. And the thing that, the reason why I say they have to also win the division is here's the teams that could be better this year that missed the playoffs by half a game or 3 games. The Vikings, who were 8-7-1 last year. I expect Atlanta to bounce back. They were 7-9. Carolina, I expect them to have a better season than 7-9 this year. And Green Bay, I expect them to have a better season than 6-9-1. And then an asterisk, because I know that you're going to sit there and go, well, Ricky, he hasn't proven himself. If Jimmy Garoppolo plays an entire season, I will throw the asterisk that the 49ers could be a wild card team to compete for a wild card spot. They'll be the double wild card. A wild card for the wild card.
So it's a wild card.
Yeah, wild card.
You never know. Anything can happen. That's why we play the game.
It's exactly, because it's like we didn't expect the Bears. The Bears were, let's be honest, a bad team in 2017. They made changes, and they were the 3rd overall seed. I just feel like Dallas, their biggest thing is I don't see them winning the Super Bowl because let's say they win the division. I see the same thing they had happen this year, where they'll win that first game.
Yeah.
Then walk into either New Orleans, LA, Chicago, and then lose. Because Chicago doesn't have Cody Parkey, so I mean that's an instant just better odds for the Bears to win. Because you don't have Cody Parkey on that team. One last question I want to ask you, and this is kind of off the Cowboys Super Bowl discussion, and more on a discussion that could gain some steam later on, like after the season. So there's an article I read today, I believe it was from ESPN, where basically because Zeke, he's got this year and then he's got next year. In your mind, could Zeke become the next Le'Veon Bell situation of like him and the Cowboys not reaching a deal on a contract extension and him being in that franchise tag hell before he's let go like Kirk Cousins?
I think he could. The Dallas Cowboys actually do a pretty good job of being good to their players. So I don't really see that happening, but it could.
Because they also got Dak coming up after this year.
They do, and we'll see what happens with Dak Prescott and if they are going to truly buy into him in the future. But for me, I look at Zeke. He's way too good. They can't mess it up. And I also don't see Zeke going as far with Le'Veon Bell to be like, all right, see you later, because that didn't work for Le'Veon. So could he? Yeah, totally. But I do actually think the Dallas Cowboys will be good to him.
I'll be completely honest. I'm looking right now. I do not want Jerry Jones's job. You want to know why?
Because they got a lot of people they got to pay.
Well, just after this year, Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Allen Hurns, Randall Cobb, and Tavon Austin. Do they keep all 4 of those? No, but I'm expecting them to maybe keep 2 or 3 of them. Maybe 2 of them, and either Hurns and Cobb, one of those 2, and then Amari Cooper. And then you've got Jason Witten. He'll probably retire. He's a free agent anyways. But then it's like you've got, let's see, Robert Quinn's a free agent. You have Sean Lee's a free agent. Jalen Smith is a restricted free agent. You've got, about 7 of your secondary, so safeties and corners, are all free agents after this year.
This is the year. Got to make it happen.
They've got a ton of people to pay, and they've got 3 looming contracts coming up, possibly 4 with Sean Lee, that the big 3 is Dak and Amari this year, then Zeke next year. How are they all going to keep that in motion? I wouldn't be surprised if one of those guys, Dak or Zeke, gets the franchise tag. My money's going on Zeke because the quarterback is a position you want to lock down and pay before anything else. Last thing I will ask you, though. So 25-1 is what Vegas put. What would you put as a percentage that the Cowboys not necessarily win the Super Bowl, but make the Super Bowl?
I mean, I would say that's pretty... maybe a little less than that. I would give it like 15, only because Saints really good, Bears
so you're saying
good,
15% chance to make it.
Okay,
I just wanted
Rams,
to make sure
good.
People weren't construing that as Mark gave them 15-1 odds to make it, because that would mean a better.
That'd be
chance.
really nice.
Yeah.
No, 15% shot. There's a lot of good teams in the NFC that are going to be competing.
Yeah, I think honestly, like 25-1 is nice for the betting odds. But I think it's around what you said, maybe like a 15 to 20% chance they make the Super Bowl. Because like I said, you got to win on the road, and especially in the playoffs, unless you're going to be the number 1 overall seed, which I don't see the Cowboys being this year. Because like I said, Bears, Rams, Saints are all better favorites in my mind to be one of those teams. I just don't see it in the cards for them to win a big road game when they have to. But this is when you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below into that comment section. We love talking to you guys. For example, we had Smallville on our Bucks video where we talked about Jameis Winston. I love fans because you guys are passionate about your teams. Me and him got into a little discussion about Jameis Winston. Very nice discussion. I want to have that same one with you guys, with Cowboy fans. If you guys are unhappy with something that we said, let us know. Let's start that discussion down below in the comment section. Also, make sure to check us out on Patreon. That's how you support us. Make sure we can keep doing these podcasts for you guys each and every week. Make sure to also rate the podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Every 5-star rating helps us get into the ears, or as I like to call them, the ear holes of more people so they can listen to the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube. Want to thank you guys for listening on podcast services around the world. And as always, have a good day, everybody.